Hi, everyone. Good evening. Wait, let's try this again. Okay. Good evening. Hi. There we are. It's lovely to be here with you tonight. Welcome. I'm really excited to share some information with you, a bit about how we do feedback here at Makers. Um, Before that, would like to indulge ourselves in a bit of mindfulness, just so we can arrive. There's been a lovely buzz, it's nice positive energy in the room, just so we arrive in the room, into our bodies, and then hopefully set us up for an evening of some good information around emotional intelligence. So if you would humor me, if this is new to you, it's nothing special you need to know. I'll guide us through just in like a minute or so. Sitting comfortably, maybe have your feet flat on the ground. And I invite you to close your eyes or just soften your gaze down to the floor. And then let's take 3 deep breaths together. So empty out your lungs completely. And then taking a deep breath in through the nose. Fill the belly. Hold the breath at the top and exhale. Let it go out through the mouth or the nose, whichever feels right. Keep exhaling. Pause the breath at the bottom. And then again, in through the nose. Take that last little sip of air. Hold and exhale. Feel the shoulders relax. They sort of melt into your chair. Keep exhaling. And then again, deep, delicious inhale. Drink that last bit of air. Hold, and then just let it go. And just notice what it feels like to give your body some more oxygen. And just coming to your senses, feel the weight of your body pressing down on your chair. If your eyes are closed, notice what the back of your eyelids look like, or just what's in your vision, your peripheral vision, if your eyes aren't closed. Allow your ears to receive sounds near and far without forming any opinions. And then notice if you can smell anything. Connecting with your sense of smell. If you can't smell anything, just feel the flow of air moving in and out of the nostrils. And sensing taste on your tongue. Now, I invite you to experience all 5 of your senses at the same time. Just broaden your awareness, not efforting or working too hard, becoming fully present in your physical body. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. Okay. So we like to do this before workshops or meetings sometimes, and it's a little tactic just to bring everybody in the room, because sometimes we're buzzing, we're up in our heads, and hopefully that didn't put you to sleep or make you feel worse or anything like that. Okay, so today's talk is called How to Master Feedback Using Emotional Intelligence. Disclaimer, it is quite info-rich, so feel free to use your phones to take notes, or if you have Notepad, that's fine. The information is, there's more details in a blog that I wrote, giving and receiving feedback skillfully, on the Makers Medium blog or my own blog, Chief Joy Officer. So go there if there's something that you feel that you've missed, but extract from this what you like. So talking about emotional intelligence, we have the 5 domains, self-awareness, and how this is integrated into the skill of feedback. So as we increase our self-awareness, we are better able to manage our emotions, so self-regulation. And as we're able to manage our own emotions, we can therefore hold space and help others with their emotions. As we become more proficient at this, we get more confident, and hopefully that motivates us intrinsically to keep building our social bonds consciously. And so feedback using your emotional intelligence. What is feedback? This is a definition we'll be working with. Information about reactions to a product, a person's performance of a task or behavior, which is used as a basis for improvement. So organizations and people all over the world struggle with the subject of feedback. We are emotional creatures after all, thinking about maybe giving feedback, challenging, you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or maybe come across arrogant or incredible, something incredible? Yeah, like not credible. That sounded off. Come across incredible. And perhaps with receiving feedback, I mean, we usually are our own harshest critics. So, having somebody look at us and shine a spotlight on stuff that we're already feeling quite insecure about, that can be triggering and painful. And so it is a difficult subject. Therefore, it makes sense to approach it from the EQ standpoint. Basically, feedback sits at the crux of two of our core human needs: the need to be loved and accepted just as we are, as well as the need for learning and growth. The examples that I gave you just now, something that underlies all of them, I mean, there's loads of examples why we'd avoid feedback, even though it's a natural and necessary component of life. We avoid feedback because we're afraid. So making fear-based decisions and actually robbing us of the thing that makes us happiest, or one of the things that make us most happiest. First is sleep, and then the second is good quality relationships. So we avoid feedback because we're fearful, walking around like this. Yeah, so self-protection, and again, robbing ourselves of learning and growth and good quality relationships. So the truth is, we cannot walk around like this. We are in an ocean of feedback constantly. Feedback isn't just in the formal performance reviews that you get at work. It's everywhere. It's in punctuation, emojis, and it's in the sigh from your partner when they find another dirty dish in the sink, or perhaps the way the driver behind you honks the hooter. Is it boop, or is it ah? Yeah, that's feedback. And so no use in, cowering and trying to protect ourselves, because we cannot escape it. Feedback is everywhere. So let's get resilient and dance with the subject more skillfully. So how do we make feedback easier? I'm going to offer you my 4 main tips. First of all, shifting our perspective, self-awareness, know thyself, understand feedback, and then using a framework. Number 1, shift your perspective. Most feedback is centered around the giver and how to give feedback skillfully, but I'd really like to encourage us to become active feedback pullers. Studies show people who actively solicit feedback, they get higher performance reviews, they're better paid, happier, healthier, etc. And they're also a lot more refreshing to be around. So this is really what we like to instill in our culture here at Makers. And it's also more empowering when you're the one actively pulling feedback. You're more likely going to be prepared and in the headspace for it. So the receiver is actually the one with the power, because they are the gatekeeper. They get to decide whether or not they're going to take the information on board. If they do, they get to learn and grow. And if they reject the feedback, they get to practice boundaries and assertiveness. If something is triggering you, maybe the feedback, it's not even about the actual information. If you are feeling emotional as a receiver of feedback, that's a cue. If you're proactive about your personal development, that's a signal to go in and get curious, lean into it and see what you might learn. #free therapy. Secondly, we have a shift in our perspective. That feedback is kind. So if, as the receiver, you are the one getting all the lovely growth nuggets, doesn't it make sense to see that that's a gift to you? And so reframing it, moving from threat to opportunity. And as you do this, you become a little bit more, each time, resilient on the subject. Number 2, know thyself. So, as I said, we are emotional creatures. We all know this. There are 3 feedback triggers, and this is based on the work by communication experts Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone. And they reduced it down to these 3 triggers. Truth triggers, where the information seems off target, wrong, off base, unfair. You don't know, you weren't there. Relationship triggers, where it's more about who's saying it rather than what's being said. Maybe we question their motives or don't trust their credibility. Then we've got identity triggers. This is where the information seems so mismatched with the way we see ourselves or the way we want to portray ourselves, and that's incredibly overwhelming as well. And because we get triggered, we reject the feedback. By all means, reject feedback. But the problem comes in is when we reject feedback too quickly because our emotions have taken over. The other thing we do is called wrong spotting. Yeah, so as information is coming at us, we're looking for what's wrong about it. We're energy preserving beings. And so if we had to find something that is right about the feedback, that means now I have to feel insecure, and now I have to go and work and put effort into it. So we're kind of hardwired to wrong spots so that we can discard the information and get on with our lives. So just knowing that we have triggers and knowing that we do this thing called wrong spotting helps us to hold a space where information's coming at us, we can be a little bit more patient, more objective, and weigh the information more carefully. Then there's a third thing that we have, blind spots. Yeah, blind spots is something about yourself that you can't see, but others can see about you. So here's some examples of what blind spots can look like. I'll give you a second to read through it. So we cannot always know our tone of voice, our facial expressions, our body language. We can't possibly monitor that all the time. We have to admit that people have a different perception of us, no matter how hard we try. And it's normal. We all have blind spots. So just knowing that we have blind spots helps us to maybe weed them out as we listen more objectively, more carefully, and obviously improve our lives. Usually when I show this slide, I think it can bring up a little bit of self-consciousness where you're like, oh no, I'm not who I thought I was. My advice is don't change yourself to please anybody else. It's your life, you're responsible for you. And if you're, knowing you're a work in progress and proactive about, doing this work with yourself and others, then, you're on the right track. But do try and weed out your blind spots by actively pulling feedback. So again, knowing that we have triggers, we wrong spot, and we have blind spots are going to help us be better receivers of feedback. It can be painful, so we need to be resilient. How do we build resilience? So I'm going to offer you my suggestion, which is tying in with the self-awareness aspect of EQ, is to understand your profile. So there's this feedback resilience profile. 3 aspects in this profile. The first is your baseline happiness. So everybody has a place that they return to, whether they've been positively stimulated or negatively. It's just that place you come back to. So if they say people who are, kind of happier on the scale, higher on the scale, they tend to do better overall on the subject of feedback. They bounce back and are more resilient, whereas people who may be a bit more pessimistic don't do as well. The good news is that this is not a fixed trait. You can increase your baseline happiness. Does anybody know of a way how to do that? Have a guess. What's it? I heard it. Thank you. There are ways, but yes, there's a formal way, a formal practice, mindfulness meditation. And we do this every day here at Makers, and there's a little link that you can take a quick test, measure your baseline, and you can see with regular practice, it actually goes up. Second thing in your profile, it's called swing. How deeply do you emote? So people with a very wide swing have high highs, low lows. People with a narrower swing, we call them even-keeled. Nothing really angers them, nothing really upsets them that much as well. And so just knowing whether you have a high or low baseline, doesn't matter, wide, narrow swing, having this level of awareness about yourself, again, helps you to hold the space and be less reactive, more responsive. And then the third thing in your profile is called recovery and sustain. So if you've been negatively stimulated, how long does it take for you to come back to your baseline? Say you've had an argument. Is it minutes, hours, days, years? Everybody's different. And if you've been positively stimulated, if you get a compliment, how long do you maintain the spring in your step? So if you've got a short sustain on positive and a long recovery on negative, that's a tricky mix. But again, we're not here to judge ourselves and beat ourselves up with the should stick. Oh, I should be feeling better by now. I should be this, I should be that. We're here to just hold a space for ourselves so that we can actually regulate our emotions just according to the way that we're wired. This also helps you be more empathetic to other people, understanding that they might have different recovery and sustain to you and swings, etc. So, yeah, then we don't have to measure people according to our own expectations, or why aren't you happier about this, or you should be over this by now. And so it's a good way to gauge. Maybe you've had an argument and you feel in a funk until midday the next day. Note that without judging yourself, and then next time something similar happens, you'll be like, yeah, I think this is going to be about 18 hours. Yeah, and it really does work like that. You don't make yourself wrong for it, but again, self-regulation. So we've got understanding feedback. I'm not going to really spend too much time on this. Basically, understand the nuts and bolts of feedback. It's a big subject. We get the 3 types of feedback: appreciation, evaluation, coaching. We need all 3, and they all 3 are there to help you grow and improve. Coming back to point number 1 is shift your perspective. Appreciation, while it might feel good to most of us, it's not there to give you the warm fuzzies. It's there to say, hey, that thing you're doing, keep doing it. You're on the right track, so you don't go off the track. We might think appreciation is the least important, but no relationship can move forward without appreciation on both sides. So yeah, there's more information on my blog, and I'll link you to some more things. Move on to point number 4, use a framework. So I'm going to offer you one of my favorites. There's loads of frameworks, and it's ASK, making the information actionable, specific, and kind, moving away from stories and subjectivity to facts and data, so that the person has a clear idea of what they can do to move forward. And then kind, this might be, unfortunately, overlooked quite often, but if you want your feedback to land, you don't want the person having to deal with the emotional hurt from poorly delivered feedback. So, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Try to make it something that they're able to receive. How to manage your energy, because this is more around giving feedback, but also applicable to receiving feedback, is communication stance. So it's a little hack. I know it seems a bit cheesy, but basically we've got doormat, lantern, and sword. So check your energy, because often with feedback, you want to ask, what's the purpose of this feedback? Sometimes maybe we're already feeling quite triggered. So then we've got doormat, maybe we don't get feedback, people pleasing, or haven't practiced assertiveness enough, overly agreeable. And that's also quite, frustrating. On the other side of it, we've got sword, where a bit too much aggression, a bit too pushy. Oh, I am just the way I am. I'm a direct person. I tell it like it is. But then again, you're going to maybe step on some people's toes and not actually have them as allies. So what we want to do with our energy is move to the lantern phase, where it's basically just to illuminate the situation, asking clarifying questions, equal relationship, where you want to bring the person on board to help you, help them, or just basically work together. So it's a collaboration. So there's a little hack for checking your energy. So coming back to the points, we have shift your perspective, moving from threat to opportunity. Feedback is kind. Self-awareness, understanding your profile and holding a space for yourself, moving from reactivity, compulsion, to response, choice. So you empower yourself and not judge yourself and also others. And then understanding feedback, educate yourself on the nuts and bolts of how feedback works, and then use the framework so we don't have to have all this guesswork on a subject that actually, as humans, is quite difficult for us and can be triggering. And then, as I said, we've got self-awareness, which is the cornerstone of emotional intelligence. As we cultivate that, we're better able to self-regulate, manage our emotions, be empathetic towards others, because we can manage our own emotions, gets us nice and motivated, and creates better social dynamics, and we live happily ever after. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dana. I was under the impression we had a Slido board for questions. I'm not entirely sure that we... Oh, we do? Awesome, fantastic. We're going to do some questions as well. Cool. So the question we have is, I'm keen to know techniques to assess emotional intelligence during recruitment. Xana, could you comment on that?
During recruitment, well, we actually don't assess emotional intelligence here, but I know that there'll be are there any HR people here? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not HR, but in our section we assess for empathy, for development, and emotional maturity.
Yeah.
So it kind of fits into the empathy you were talking about in the 5 domains.
And specific tools that you use?
Sorry?
Any specific tools that you use to do that? Yeah. So if I'm honest with you, we don't have any specific techniques. Obviously, and in coaching, you have to gauge and use your best judgment. But for our staff and our makers here, we present the information and allow them to extract it as they feel on their journey. We don't really assert it onto anybody in our environment. But I'd be interested to, if anybody wants to come chat about it, to educate myself more on that. And if somebody else, if you have anything that that works. I know there's like a number of things out there, and I've been approached by different companies who want to do that, but at this stage, Makers hasn't really called for it. I see you raise your hand.
We have a programming exercise as part of the interview process, and although we're looking at technical skills, it's as much about giving and receiving feedback about how you approach the problem.
Yeah.
I think, although it's not directly assessing that, we are looking for those values and behaviours.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do have quite a rigorous interview process before onboarding somebody onto the course or onto the staff faculty as well. And yeah, we will be looking for those competencies as well. But admittedly, there's no formal process. We're gauging as people what we would prefer. So yeah, to whoever that was, sorry if I didn't answer your question. I hope that was helpful. But do come chat to me, because I'm always curious about these things. Racial line. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like to
Good
say a
online
question?
resources. Good online resources. There's a question mark, so I say it as a question. Sounds more like a statement. For feedback, I take it. Yeah, Google, thanks, Simon. Well, I mean, do check out my blog, because I do link my sources in my blog, and yeah, I mean, that as well, and there's loads of places that are like actually training this, they come in-house. You'll have to find what fits for you, because there's a bit of a dynamic crowd. Online resources. One of the main books that I've read on this it's called Thanks for the Feedback. Again, Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Last question, I think.
Yeah.
Time for any more, I'm afraid.
What does EQ stand for?
Quick one.
Emotional quotient. Yeah. So there you go. Thanks so much.
Another round of applause for Dana, everybody. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dana. So next up, please welcome Simon Rouse. Simon is a director at Credit Suisse who focuses on credit derivative software development. He's going to be speaking to us today about the importance of emotional intelligence for better mental well-being in the tech team. I believe, is he being mic'd up, or are you already mic'd up? Okie dokie, please. A round of applause while he's being mic'd up, everybody. What does Simon win for getting all the references? Hey! Warm round of applause for Simon, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Simon Rouse, Director at Credit Suisse. I've been at Credit Suisse for 21 years now, believe it or not. You don't look old enough? Yes, that is the correct answer. During which time, so I started off as a programmer, Perl CGI, web programming, back in the days where that was considered witchcraft. And since then, I've been working in various tech lead roles, and I've had the good fortune to work with colleagues in America, across Europe, Switzerland. I've built teams in India, and other parts of the world as well, which gives me, I believe, quite a good perspective on the way that different people or different cultures relate to emotional intelligence. So in terms of the agenda, I'd like I'll talk about emotional intelligence, or I'll quickly put up a quick slide, and then I'm going to really relate that to a well-being technique that I'm particularly keen on, and draw parallels thereafter. And then we'll finish up by talking about some of the examples that I use in the workplace. So, page down. Spacebar, very simple. Okay, so this is, these are I guess the 5 tenets which are presumably corresponding to yours. And I've highlighted some key pieces there that really resonate with me. So, take a quick look. I think the key part, as has been mentioned, self-awareness, that's key, and probably key to the remaining 4 as well. The way we are thinking or feeling is not related to how we behave. Hang on to that. Self-regulation talks about negative emotions and relieving from stressful activities, mindfulness, which we're increasingly familiar with. Motivation, very important. Empathy as well has been mentioned. And social skills, so social skills very relevant here. And people with good social skills and who can relate to people socially have very good mental health typically. So how do we build our emotional intelligence, and how can that relate to some of the techniques that I'm going to come on to talk about? So, practice self-awareness, that's fairly obvious. 2 things, knowing what you're doing and knowing what you're feeling. Much of the time we're on autopilot. Don't judge the emotions that arise. The second one, the highlighted bit especially, you can't control your feelings and emotions, you can only react differently to them. Motivation is key. And then values as well. Values very important. Values define what you're striving for over the long term in life. We sometimes talk about goals. Goals are short-term milestones, short-term objectives, which hopefully take us towards our values. The bottom statement there, I think, is quite widely known. People with high EQ have better mental health. So I'd like to, this is the kind of standard stuff. I want to relate this now to a set of therapies called acceptance commitment therapy, which is increasingly used in promoting good mental health, mental well-being, forward-thinking type therapy. There's actually 6 tenets part of that. The remaining 2 are the acceptance and the commitment. I can talk more about those if people are interested later. There's, it's a really interesting and deep topic. There's a lot of good material. There's a lot of proponents, the chief being Stephen Hayes, who's a professor of psychiatry. And there's a lot of TED-style quality talks on YouTube, which you can obviously refer to. So the 4 remaining pillars, mindfulness, which we know about mindfulness. Mindfulness, connecting with the current moment, connecting with your senses, being in the current moment, often associated with meditation practices as we practiced. Cognitive diffusion is a key part of this. So what does this mean? Remember, previously we saw that you can't control your emotions, you can't control your thoughts, and if you try to control your memory or push away difficult thoughts, then it won't work. You'll make them worse, which is why PTSD is a thing. So instead of going down that path, what cognitive, and that would be cognitive fusion, right? You're bonded to difficult thoughts. So cognitive diffusion is really recognizing that, and instead of solving that problem, taking almost a third-person relationship with your thoughts, and getting some separation in there, right? So separate yourself, separate who you are and what you are how you're going to react and what you're going to do and what these thoughts mean to you, and relate to them in the third person. And so the cognitive diffusion techniques are really things like, and there's lots of them, they might sound a little crazy, but you know, if your brain's malfunctioning, and it can, and it might, then give it a persona, right? Give it a name. Observe without judgment. Observe with curiosity. See that something else is happening here at the moment. Okay, I need to see this as something else. This doesn't define who I am. This doesn't define what I'm going to do about it. Self as context. Is a similar concept. It's kind of, there's three meanings of self. There's the self as context, the conceptualized self, and then the self that we have throughout our life that pins everything we're doing and how we relate from our childhood to where we currently are. And then the last tenet that I'll go through is values. Already spoke about that, and we can pull that from the initial slide as well. Value is what's important to us fundamentally over the longer term, which might be professional career related things or family life, and the sort of classic, perhaps slightly morbid ACT exercise here is how would you like to be spoken about at your funeral? You know, how would you like somebody to stand up and talk about you? You'd want them to talk about a person with wide perspective who's travelled, who's had a career, who's had a good relationship, not somebody who's been narrowed by their emotions, by their difficulties, and constrained by things like experiential avoidance, which is, you know, can be part of a lot of mental health conditions. Okay, so that's, and like I say, the other parts are acceptance. There has to be a level of acceptance rather than fighting with anything that's difficult that's going on, and commitment to a path to take you towards your values. All right, so that's, I think there's interesting parallels there between this technique and what we're talking about with emotional intelligence. So moving on. This is just a quick slide. I mean, we all know the statistics around mental health and mental well-being. Doesn't come out too well, hey? The statistics are poor, horrendous, and getting worse. And I'm sure that everybody knows them. This is really around work days lost, and it's a big number. It's like, you know, depending on your interpretation of when you take statistics, 8.2 million a year. It's the leading class of work that occupational health do now. So 10 years ago it was musculoskeletal, which would be backache. Now it's considerably more in the mental health spectrum. Those are the days off. Doesn't account for the people who come to work and who are suffering with lost productivity, accuracy, creativity. Typically people with mental health problems are quite good at hiding where they're at and that sort of thing. So you can see there's an enormous impact here if we can get this right. So, you know, what can leaders do to help their teams or encourage their employers to put processes into place? So I think a tremendous thing, obviously, with the self-awareness, which is a key piece here, 360 feedback. We heard about feedback already and the value of feedback. 360, obviously, from peers, from people who work for you, as well as management. There's different ways you can arrange that, right? You can maybe a manager can anonymize it. Obviously, it has to be done with sensitivity and with control, but it's a tremendous tool, especially for management, right? Who often don't get feedback from their teams. A tremendous help for self-awareness. Interesting here with cultural differences, again, necessary to be culturally sensitive. Different people will respond to feedback or want to give feedback in a different way, as I've observed over the time. Knowing your team and peers as individuals, what works for somebody won't work for somebody else. People react to feedback and sort of maybe more sort of pointed type activities in a very different way. Coaching so I work in a bank, right, where we have deadlines, we have a lot of pressure, and the business are often in a frame of mind where they believe that the louder they shout or the more agitated they appear to be, the quicker they're going to get something, which doesn't work, by the way. So people coming in from different cultures, from different levels of experience, that can be off-putting, right? So when a client is angry, they might be angry with the situation they're in, they're not angry to you. Obviously, when somebody's angry in front of you, it comes across quite directly, and people can struggle with that, and that can impact them. Breaks, including outside time. We have a program at work where people are encouraged to go out, and you can either go for a walk, you can go for a run at lunchtime. I think increasingly the culture is, I don't want to know it, is to kind of, you know, there's dangers in this working through culture. The other thing I see at my place, I don't know where other people work, is we use Skype for meetings, which is very good internationally, clearly, but then it also, you just, you know, for a Skype meeting, people are at their desks, taking a meeting at their desks, so trying to do work at the same time. Are they engaged in the meeting, right? There's a mindful thing here, right? You can't be doing two things at once. You have very low quality meetings all of a sudden. And if people are in front of their PCs for the whole time, I don't think that's a great way to spend 8 hours a day. So take people away, take them into a different room, take them to a different floor, go outside, whatever it needs to be, right? Which is the meetings in person. And another great facility, and again, this is kind of anonymous, or it's not, you know, none of this stuff needs to come down from on high. It's things that can be implemented within the organisation at mid-levels, or, you know, you can be suggested to your manager. So mentee-mentor relationships, obviously informal, anonymous. Traditionally, the senior person would be helping along a junior person, and that's great. But also the reverse, right? So sometimes a lot of decisions are taken by senior people because they think they know what the junior people want. Not the case. So in the mentoring relationship, the junior person can explain how they're feeling, what's important to them, right? They come from a different generation, they have different levels of importance. So a great tool for both the emotional intelligence and for well-being there. All right, so bang on time, right?
Thanks, Simon. Cool. Fantastic. Do we have any questions from the audience? I don't believe we have any on Slido at the moment. Has anyone got any questions they would like to ask Simon? Cool, over here. Do we have another microphone? Is this one working? Great. There we go. Thanks, Josh.
Right, cool. Thank you.
Thanks for a great talk. I'm just wondering how you approach bridging cultural differences when it comes to talking about emotional intelligence and EQ, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. So the example I was going to use on with feedback, when I set up a team in India, it was a relationship where they were very respectful of me. Sometimes, and super team, fantastic level of productivity. I asked them for feedback because genuinely I want feedback, and I often don't get that from people who work for me, and it won't come because they're not comfortable. People from that culture potentially not comfortable with providing feedback to people superior. Now I don't want to be more senior rather. So I don't want to, I want to work in a much more level organisation, and I want people to interact with me on a much more level basis. But that's an example of where you have to encourage people and try and break that down. Does that answer your question? Somewhat.
Yeah. So, when you asked them for feedback, did you get anything from it?
No, I got a lot of positive feedback, which can't be right. If anybody who's ever worked with me.
Right. Do we have any more questions?
How do you... thank you. Thank you for your talk, really good. How do you implement self-awareness or EQ in your daily life or amongst your team? As I've heard that you have a team, or you're working like in a senior role, and do you kind of trying to also encourage them to, hey,
we're having a meeting, let's all, like what we did just, or do you have any, how do you experience EQ in your workplace?
Okay, yeah. I'll take the sort of second, the mental health aspect to your question. I'll take the second one. So within my company, we have a mental health network, for example. I'm a mental health first aider, so there's a proportion of people that are implanted. Or we've gone through the training, so there's good coverage. Because with these, you know, with something like that, somebody's not going to want to approach their manager, right? Because I had a case recently where they're worried about the impact on their career, as you can understand. So it needs to be a much more private thing. They're not going to go to HR. So that's why we have that within the workforce as part of network. We have visiting speakers. We have some mindfulness, probably not as much as you guys, but maybe we'll get there. Your first question was developing EQ within the team, I think. It's really noticing where people, the situations that push people quite hard, whether it's a client or whether it's an interpersonal relationship, and where they're taking a course of action or that's not helpful, right? So, and for different people, so it could be just take some time, or the client is nervous about their delivery. He's not got a problem with you. He thinks you're doing a good job, actually, but the way he's expressed it is in this manner. So you just think around that sort of thing. Really depends on the situation. Yeah, I reckon. I mean, it can be different things. So it can be within the team, or it can be as a result of some external pressure. I mean, clearly, if you're in a situation where you're working hard against a deadline, then the chances of this sort of difficulty arising are much, much higher, because people are on edge and they're being pushed. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
That's all the time we have for questions.
All right, cool.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Thank you.